I'm Sam Bizek of BossStrength.com, and today on episode 7 of BossBytes, we're going to be talking about a pretty common question that I see asked around the internet, and that's the question of whether or not you should lose body fat or begin to build muscle first. So the answer to this is a little bit different from what most people think, as in that it's not so cut and dry, and it's very individual based. So to keep this brief and concise and to the point, I'm going to address 3 different scenarios and then give an opinion on whether or not you should cut down or if you should increase your lean muscle mass first. So in the first scenario, let's take a person who happens to be really obese or really overweight. In that situation, the answer is probably pretty cut and dry, and that's you should attempt to try and create better nutritional habits, begin an exercise program, and overall lose weight. And really, that's only because being very large and obese is actually not very healthy. And, with a large amount of fat mass, it can make any progress that you see pretty slow. It makes it very difficult to see any muscle building that might actually be going on. Second, if you're in that position, you probably don't want to be eating in ways that would bring about muscle growth. So that means eating close to your maintenance or potentially even slightly above. If you have a lot of weight to lose, it makes sense that you should start a healthier nutrition program and you should begin exercising with the main focus of trying to drop some of those pounds. Eventually, once you get to a point that you're fairly lean, you might want to consider, switching up your training a bit to be more conducive to building muscle. However, in that situation, you'll definitely want to work with a nutritionist or a trained professional in order to appropriately manage your calories and get you to a good place of healthy eating habits. If you happen to be very obese, it's very likely that either you have a medical condition that led to that, or you just have pretty bad nutritional habits, which might not necessarily be your fault, but it's something that you need to be cognizant about if you've lost weight and don't want to gain it back. So if you happen to be very obese and not exercising or adjusting your nutrition at all, I suggest that the best move is to try and get to a healthier place, and that just might happen to come along with training and eating specifically to lose some body weight. Second, we have to consider a normal person, somebody who isn't overweight but isn't overly muscular and doesn't really exercise a lot. If you're coming from a position where you're just an everyday person who is fairly healthy, it really comes down to your own personal preference. I personally suggest that if you happen to be of a normal stature, healthy eating habits, and just don't work out at all, I suggest starting a training program and keeping your nutrition exactly like it is, or making it a bit more healthy if you feel that you have some tendencies to eat junk food. If you eat pizza and burgers daily, it might be a better idea to, try and introduce some healthier eating habits so that when you start your training program, it will be more conducive to actually progressing and building muscle. But overall, it should primarily be down to your own personal choice. Do you want to increase strength and build muscle, or do you want to get more shredded, or do you want to get down to a low body fat percentage? Really, in that situation, the answer is not as cut and dry as if you were undereating or overeating constantly. It really comes down to, whether or not you want to increase size and strength, or if you want to reduce your body fat further. So for a normal middle-of-the-road person, it really comes down to your own personal preference. Of course, all of these different scenarios come down to your personal preference. However, if we're thinking about what you should do relative to certain situations, that's my suggestion. Make your decision and stick to it. Third, if you happen to be somebody who's very, very small and doesn't have a lot of weight to lose, in this situation, again, it's personal preference, but I suggest probably trying to eat and exercise in a way to increase muscle mass. It's not to say that you can't reduce body mass, but if you're already pretty small and consuming a low amount of calories, it might not be in your best interest to try and restrict calories further, or to eat in a way that will induce further weight loss. And that's something that taps into different psychological things. People who are already small and think that they need to be smaller. That's not something I want to get into right now, because I'm certainly not qualified to give a sound opinion on that. But if you're in that situation where you're very small already and you're not exercising, I would suggest that you just start a training program, eat as you normally would, and then adjust your eating habits based on how you feel and how you want to progress. So just to recap, if you're very obese and not exercising, it's probably a good idea to either just start a training program or to have a combination of restricting calories a bit and starting a training program, so that you can start to lose weight and get to a little bit healthier of a position before you start to have the goal of specifically trying to put on muscle mass. That's not to say that you can't train to put on muscle mass. It's more so dealing with how you should probably eat. And if you happen to be extremely overweight or slightly overweight, it might be in your best interest to eat in ways that are conducive to dropping some pounds. And then once you get to a healthier state, then you can start to consider increasing muscle mass. If you happen to be a middle of the road person, somebody who's just like of a normal stature, size, weight, and isn't exercising, I suggest picking and choosing which is the best route for you. I would suggest in either direction you take, start an exercise program, and then keep your nutrition pretty stable, and then just see how you react to the training program. After a month or 2 months of consistently working out, you can sort of make the decision of whether or not you want to train specifically to increase muscle mass, or if you want to train and eat in ways that are conducive to dropping some body weight. Lastly, if you happen to be kind of underweight or very lean to begin with, again, it comes down to personal preference. However, I suggest in this situation it's probably best to at least start a training program with the specific purpose of increasing muscle mass and strength. And then after a little while, after you see how you respond, you can begin to manipulate your calories in either way. Just make sure that you pick a route and stick with it for a little while, and then adjust accordingly. Lastly, I just wanted to say, regardless of the decision that you make, you should make sure to stick with it. I suggest that you depending on the severity of your issues, or how much weight you have to lose, or how much weight you're hoping to gain, I suggest sticking with any route you take for at least a month, perhaps 2 months before you make a decision. Especially for beginners, even though strength adaptations come pretty quick, and if you happen to be obese and not exercising and then starting an exercise program, weight loss typically comes pretty quick. A lot of times people jump the gun and feel like they're not doing the right thing because they haven't seen progress within a week. These things take time. So if you're in one of these three situations and you want to start something, I suggest making your decision and sticking to it for a little while. You have to remember that in the long scheme of things, 1 month of doing something that might not be exactly what you wanted to do is a lot different than trying to do something for a week and then deciding, oh, it's not working, and then just like jumping around to all different types of programs. And it's probably one of the reasons why most people never see progress, or once they do make progress, they revert back to their old habits. Make a decision and stick to it. And then, after a month or 2 months, then you can make a decision of whether or not you actually made the right decision, and you can adjust accordingly. And lastly, I hate to plug this again, but this is a really good opportunity for you to consult with somebody, consult with an expert, a trainer, somebody who's on the outside and can say, oh, you have a significant amount of weight to lose. Let's start a training program with the specific focus of trying to lose weight. Or, hey, you could probably stand to put on a couple pounds. Like, maybe we should train and eat in a way that's conducive to that. Having a second set of eyes is always prudent when you're unsure of which route to take. So hopefully that answered your question about whether or not you should bulk or drop some body weight. First, like I said, it really comes down to personal preference and, of course, your starting point. And without continuing this any further, I think that wraps it up for this question today. If you happen to have any questions, please consider commenting below this video, commenting on Facebook, Boss Strength Sam. Or if you're on the website, you can click Ask Sam a Question if you're on a computer, and you can simply click the Facebook icon if you're on mobile, where you can send me a message immediately, and I'll be able to respond within a reasonable amount of time. So I think that about wraps it up. If you enjoyed this video, please consider giving it a like, and if you really enjoyed this content, please consider subscribing to the YouTube channel as well as the podcast. I'll talk to you next time. Thanks for stopping by.